my name's Lisa McIntyre-Hite. I'm with Guild Education, and for those of you who don't know, Guild works with Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies and manages their education benefits, bringing together kind of the best in our academic partners, some of whom are on this stage, and bringing them to our employers and to our members, to our learners, so that way they can experience economic mobility, have access to education benefits. Part of our work here, could I get someone to close the back door? I'm so sorry. It's just, they're partying too hard out there. But we're going to party in here in a minute once we get rolling, I promise. When we talk about credit for X, what we're really talking about is ensuring that all learning can count, right? And so whether you are a frontline worker, a cashier who's maybe gone through a specific training, or if you have that degree, we should be in a world where all verifiable, high-quality learning can count. And so truly what we're talking about is an equity imperative, shifting that power dynamic from a university system where it's only what you learn in a confine of a classroom can be validated and accepted, and really thinking about how do we expand that and what does that look like. So I'm super excited to be joined here with an awesome group of panelists. I'm going to do brief introductions, but if you want to learn more, go to the app and read their bios. Emily is the Director of Credit for X at Guild Education. We also have, I'm going to go in order, Radhika, who is from LSU, Louisiana State University, one of our academic partners. We have John Caines, who is from Max-Grad, who's going to talk a little bit more about that. Amber Garrison Duncan from the Competency-Based Education Network, and Nancy Salzman from UMass Global as well. So happy to be here and happy to have everyone on the panel. I am just going to kick off and ask the question, like, for each of you, and would love for everyone to respond. We can just go down the panel here. Talk to us a little bit about what your primary driver is and why credit for X. Why is this something that you're passionate about? Why is it something that you're trying to champion at your organization or at your institution? Emily?
I think I'm the one without a microphone. Sorry. It is lovely to be here. I think when I think about the why behind Credit for X, and especially the why in a place like Guild Education, where we're really trying to bridge the gap between employers and academic partners, it's really about finding these moments in a multi-sided marketplace that are a win for everyone involved. There are not a lot of moments like that in life, and certainly in the business world or the education world. So I really care about trying to take full advantage of that. In a place where we can do right by students, we can save money to employers who are paying for their employees to go back to school, and we can bring more students with amazing learning under their belts to our academic partners. That feels like a good reason to get out of bed every day.
Yeah, similarly for me, it's just that recognition, the validation, and appreciating the value they bring to the academic degree, and the message that we are sending them, the powerful notion that everything that they've done till now counts, right? And it will propel them through the education door is very affirming. So that's my why.
Yeah, that's great. So for me, my why, my passion, the reason why I champion this work is personal and is near and dear to my heart. So I'm Black, Afro, Dominican American, and I was born in the South Bronx. I have 11 aunts and uncles. My grandparents to support the family. My grandmother worked housekeeping jobs, and my grandfather was a maintenance engineer for the building that we lived in. And as part of his compensation, he had one of 4 jobs, but as part of the compensation, the landlord would allow my family to live in the basement apartment. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. So very humble beginnings. Fast forward 30 years later, I have 43 offspring from those 11 aunts and uncles. Huge family. Right? Out of everyone in my family, only 5 of us have a college degree. Right? So there's a major opportunity for the other people in my family that have some college credit but no degree. They started, stopped out, life circumstances, other folks that only have a GED, to be able to help reskill and upskill those folks, right? So there's millions of families out there in America that have the same example and experience that my family had. So for me, it's really personal and important to be able to reach out to those folks. People don't know what they don't know. You need to get them access to this information, that there is credit for X that you can get, right? And these folks have just been working over the past 30 years, just gaining valuable work experience and skills that can be transferable. So that's why I'm here, and that's why we do the work that we do.
So I'm at the Competency-Based Education Network, and really everything that we do is about upending higher education to work for today's students. Recognizing that the credit hour and proxies for learning like grades don't work for today's students. And in many ways, higher education, and it's acknowledging the past, that higher education was discriminatory. Higher education was exclusive of Black and brown people, of women for so long in this country. But guess what? That didn't mean people weren't learning. We learn, that's what we do as humans. And so really being able to, again, upend how we look at learning, regardless of where that happens. It is about mastery of learning, and at CBEN, we don't care where you learned it. We're happy to give you credit for that and then move you on to and add value to get you as quickly as possible through your program so that you can get back to work and onto mobility. So that's really just upending the system that has been exclusive and not served the bulk of our citizens.
Thank you for including me. So at University of Massachusetts Global, our student population, the median age is mid-30s, and our students come with all different backgrounds. They have already been out in the world doing things, and we really want to respect that knowledge, skills, and abilities that they've already learned in a variety of ways. Perhaps it's in some other formalized manner, education or training, but perhaps it's on the job. It's something that they did as a volunteer. It's something that they decided to learn on their own. It's a test that they took in order to get an industry-recognized certification. Those are all things that where learning can be measured, and so we think it's important to respect that and to provide credit for those opportunities that they have taken upon themselves and brought with them to us.
Nancy, I really love the use of the word respect in that, right? Because at the end of the day, it is about respecting the lived lives and experiences that people bring as whole humans to our institutions and to our organizations. And so, Nancy, I'm actually going to start with you because you have been doing the work of credit, incorporating Credit for X at your institution for quite some time, and one of our early partners at Guild. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started and what that looked like for you?
Sure. So historically, we have pretty much always provided credit for the standard kinds of things: military training, CLEP, Dante's, other credit for exams. And more of our students were coming to us with trainings that they had received at their places of work, industry-recognized certifications. And we were also an early adopter of competency-based education. So we really believed that, like I said before, individuals master knowledge, skills, and abilities from all sorts of places. And our faculty was absolutely on board with that because they were really drivers in how can we figure out how to provide credit, what does that credit look like, and what's the process, and what are we looking for. So slowly we got started probably about 8 or 9 years ago and built out an entire process.
Awesome. And Radhika, I know you all are, LSU is kind of a newer partner in our Credit for Training. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you got started and what that looks like for you at LSU?
Yeah, sure. So we adopted two kind of strategies. One was starting with industry-reputed certifications, which we could confidently take to a faculty member and say, you've heard of for project management or SHRM or whatever, the ones that faculty are well aware of the rigor. So that was one way, and we did the crosswalk for them. And so we presented them literally on a platter, saying, here, we've done all the work, you just have to look at it, verify, and approve. The other strategy was to find early adopters and advocates. Like for our construction management, the chair is really progressive, and he's willing to go to bat and educate his faculty, saying, this is a good thing, guys. So those two worked for us. That's how we got started. So both in industry reputed and finding early champions.
Awesome. Awesome. Emily, can you talk a little bit about, in terms of your work in Credit for Training, kind of what is that process and how are you working across employers and university partners or academic partners to kind of enable this system?
Yeah, I think a lot about trying to make this incredibly difficult work a little bit easier for all of the stakeholders that we serve at Guild. So we're not going to make it not hard work. That's not going to be possible. There's all these crosswalks to do. There's all these platters to fill with great work. But we can try and make it a little bit easier and try and streamline the process. And one of the big things I take as being part of that responsibility is to really embed with Guild's employer partners to really understand what does learning look like at their company, what does training look like at their company, and what are all the places where truly high quality college level learning is taking place, and then helping them position that learning so that it's really easy for all of our wonderful university partners to review. So doing a little bit of that choice making and also doing a little bit of that translation. We've found that that can be the streamlining effort that makes this a little bit possible and a little bit more scalable for all of the people involved. Both the employer partners who have spent a lot of time and resources making great trainings, and then they don't know what they don't know, so they don't know what to do with it, and to make sure that our academic partners who are really fighting to make sure there are resources to get these kind of things reviewed, have what they need to make that process a tiny bit smoother so that a little bit more of it can happen. But the credit goes to our partners who do the real work.
And I think part of the beauty of that relationship that everyone here has described so far is like the onus is not necessarily on that learner to have to navigate a really complicated system. It's kind of like the work that you all have done behind the scenes makes it so that person can say, oh, I have this credit. And we've heard a lot of stories where members have told us, learners have told us, if it weren't for the credit that I received from my training, if I didn't know that I was going to get credit for training, I would have never thought about going to college. I never saw myself in that shoe. I never saw myself actually as that learner, and I think that's really a powerful narrative for why we do this work. John, I want to start with you for the next question. As we're thinking about empowering credit for X, from your perspective, what kind of opportunities do you see for innovation, whether from a technology perspective or a systems perspective, to really drive this work?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. From an innovation perspective, I'll share a resource with everyone. There's a company called CALE in Chicago. Not as in the leafy green, but it's an acronym of CAEL, stands for the Council of Adult Experimental Learning, and they've been a champion for credit for prior learning for a long time, and they do great work. They have a tool that helps you allow to award and track it in a much more effective and efficient and sustainable manner. And if you think about the millions of people that we need to serve and give access to this tool, we need to be able to do it at scale. So we need the technology tools that are going to be robust enough to be able to handle that capacity, right? So last year we were lucky enough to partner with them and develop and revamp and rebuild their current credit for prior learning tool, and it's phenomenal. Lisa had the pleasure of checking it out, and there's good reviews. So go ahead.
Is that a credit aggregator or something like that?
Yeah, so they have a credit predictor tool that's like their lead generator, which is also kind of goes into the next piece. What we've learned out of that is that there's two major areas for innovation, and that's one is in the lead generation space. So you really need to be able to get folks access, right? Like Emily mentioned earlier, people don't know what they don't know, right? So being able to have a lead generation tool that gives people an opportunity to get a taste of what their completion opportunity is, it's really big. The second piece, there is an opportunity for innovation is in the assessment area. Right? So what we've learned is that there's a lot of opportunities to be able to, like I mentioned, streamline that assessment, make it easier, right, for students to be able to follow the process, to be able to learn. And then what I'll also add is that from the work that we do at Max-Grad, what we've learned is that, one thing that we do is that we help students understand what are all their options for completion at the school that they once left, right? So if you've been out in the marketplace or reach out to you, say you're 60% complete towards completing X degree, these are the classes you're missing, this is what's gonna cost you, whatever the case is. But what we also do is that we take it a step further. We also incorporate in that message to them, letting them know that, hey, I know you've been out in the marketplace for X amount of time since you stopped out. We can be able to convert that to get you closer to that finish line, right? So it's a big opportunity to save time and money for these students when it comes to be able to have those innovative solutions like that.
That's great. Amber, I know over the years with CBEN and with others, there's been a lot of conversation around kind of like the currency. Like, this is all like kind of a no-brainer, right? Of course we should award credit for prior training, for prior learning, for credit for all of people's lived experiences, but it's tough work to do, and it's tough around systems. So from your perspective, what might make it easier? What kind of innovations or ideas do you all have in terms of what could make it easier to actually like track and award this that isn't so cumbersome for all of the parties involved right now?
Absolutely. On a panel earlier, we were talking about this being pick and shovel work, because it's like we're digging in the ditches. I mean, it is intensive work because, again, you want to make sure you're looking at the learning, and our current system is based on time. It's based on grades that don't tell us what do you actually know and can do. So instead, folks are looking at course syllabi and pulling stuff. The military member walking in, what's your JST, what's your military occupation code, so imagine if the average student walks in and has had prior learning experience, that they're bringing the average of 7 transcripts to you, that you have to go back to all those places, dig out that stuff, hopefully they have it online for you, hopefully they're willing to share it with you, right? So it really is impossible. The other thing that does is it requires the learner to present. So all this research was like, prior learning is great, right? We see in the associate's degree, students are 4 times more likely to complete. In their bachelor's degree, they're 2 times more likely to complete when they get credit for prior learning, but they have to know to ask for it. And so all the research is like, they just didn't ask. Well, again, you don't know what you don't know. And if you're coming to a system that has failed you 7 times, why would you ask? This should be systematized, that this is automatically what we do when every learner walks in the door. And to get to scale, some of this is we've got to shift our system to be able to shift, competencies need to be the currency of learning, not credit hours. So that means we're changing our data systems. We're changing the records right now. So transcripts are getting transformed to be digital, owned by the student, so they have to track down their stuff. They can just give it up to you. It's going to have competencies and skills in it. It's going to have evidence of what you did to demonstrate that. So now when I show up to Nancy, who's willing to do the extra hard work, we just made Nancy's life easier to be able to give me credit for what I already know and can do. But again, there's lots of innovations needed on the institutional side. John's doing great work around once that transcript comes in, I now have to be able to look at program level competencies and understand what I'm giving you credit for. And that right now is done mostly by hand and Excel spreadsheets. That's right. Not scalable, right? So there's a lot of things that ed tech can do to automate this. One is, again, support us to be able to work in competencies. 2, help us accelerate the ability in which we can machine read this information so that, again, when we get to the institution, they can spend time with the student, not on all of this back-end stuff that's bringing them down. The other thing I wanted to say real quick is that I'm just staring at John's title here.
Stop it.
As the Chief Creator of Opportunity, like everything I just described, if we all put on the Chief Creator of Opportunity hat, like what we could do together. So just, yes, that's an awesome title.
Cheers.
I'm going to try to borrow that.
I love that. I love that. And I love I need to read this. Chief Creator of Opportunity. One of the things that I think is interesting and I think has been challenging for those who are trying to do this work is that while on paper people are aligned, sometimes we might have to overcome some dissent and people saying like, actually, this eats into our revenue. We can't give credit for X. Or actually, I didn't teach it, and so there's no possible way it could be high quality. As we think about kind of overcoming dissent so that we can create a culture of opportunity at our institutions and organizations, I would love to hear a little bit of kind of like what folks have done to help overcome that kind of dissent and deal with those kind of challenges. So Radhika, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you there.
Sure. So we actually had to do a lot of educating the faculty. So I remember Charlotte and we used to go into the college departments and talk to them, show them statistics, right? Like if you give it credit for prior learning, they can graduate faster, their time to completion, and those helped. And then, as I said, we did all the upfront work for them and then talked to them through that. Like, this is the crosswalk, these are the competencies, and this is how you award credit. So that kind of helped. And the third one was finding advocates. So that's been really helpful, having early champions and who's willing to talk to the other departments too. So when you have somebody from their own talking to the other person, that's helped too. So those are the kind of things that has helped. And we've also been able to show early successes, like for construction management and for leadership and human resource. Their enrollments have doubled.
Wow, that's
With
powerful.
Yeah, so that's like, okay, so no, they literally sat up and said, oh.
And those enrollment declines everywhere else are happening, but that's impressive.
Yeah, so it's doubled. So it was great success stories to share with them. And then moving down, Louisiana is actually going to implement a statewide PLA policy. So we are hoping that will help leverage any other kind of, so yeah. So far, so good.
Good. Any other advice for those who have to overcome dissent or think through kind of how to move this forward? Nancy?
So faculty seems to be a common theme. And so we involved our faculty to, we initially put together a small group, and it included people out of our assessment teams, out of my Office of Applied Innovation, and faculty members who made determinations as to, okay, what is this process going to look like? How are we going to know that this is high quality, that there's the rigor that we would require, that there's appropriate assurance of learning? What should these assessments look like? We stayed away from seat time, though we do use it sometimes, but that is not a primary factor for us. But the small group of faculty were the drivers, and they were the ones who really defined what are the factors for high quality training, learning, that type of thing. And then they went out and they were the trainers for other faculty members who would then be involved in the evaluation process. And I just want to go back a moment to the whole database thing and that. So once something's been evaluated, we don't evaluate it again. So when a student comes in, Walmart, their training, we evaluated it once. If it went through a major substantial change, we would evaluate it again. But we have a electronic database, and any prospective student, well, it's open to the public, anyone can see exactly what their training, their learning, their certifications, their whatever, are worth credit-wise, and not just, oh, it's 3 semester credits, but it's the equivalent of this course and this competency, which is program applicable to these programs. So that database is, is public-facing. And when a student applies, or when an applicant applies, the coach that they work with through the application process, part of what that coach does is walk through, so what have you been doing? What trainings might you have had from where you have worked in the past? Do you have any certifications? Did you take any short courses? Have you ever heard of Straighterline? Have you ever heard of Open Classrooms? Have you ever heard, that type of thing? So we can tease out from them possible credit that they may not think of. Just like Amber said, they don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
And can I add one thing that I've actually worked with Nancy and I've watched her do, which I think is also really powerful in terms of overcoming dissent, is allowing the opportunity for the reviewers, whoever they may be, faculty or not, to provide real and substantive feedback, right? For it to be an actual conversation and a feedback loop between the creators and the deliverers of the learning that's being reviewed and the folks reviewing it. Whether or not anything changes about that learning, I think is actually a little bit beside the point, but having that communication line open to think about, look, you brought us this wonderful training to review. We think it's worth this many credits of this type, but if you did this, if you changed it in this tiny way, if you made this little tweak, ooh, the things we could do. So I think that's also can be really powerful in terms of overcoming dissent. I know Nancy had moved on to other stuff, but I wanted to make sure that was highlighted because I've watched her facilitate that in the past.
I'm going to hit the transparency piece home. A couple of things is, again, being able to show that faculty concern is there for a reason, right? They've been asked to do a job, and they take that job very seriously. So I think we get frustrated with faculty sometimes because we're like, oh, but that transparency of what you said, of opening a conversation, we did a lot of work around military-based learning, and I remember sitting down with faculty who were like, this really sounds awesome, but I have no idea what somebody did because I've never been in the military. I mean, that is a whole different context of applying skills that most of us in this room have never seen or been a part of. And so once we sat down with the local education office and we did some of that translation and showed, you know, in the military, it's the ultimate competency-based, like, it's go, no go stuff, right? You can either do the job or not. And once the faculty saw that and could see, like, whoa, this is more serious than anything we do, like, we love this. This is great. This is amazing. And they understood how to, again, take that in and knew what to do with it. But also just want to hit home the transparency around institutions making that public. What Nancy talked about is extremely rare. And so we ask students to come and apply and tell us if they're coming, and then we'll look at your stuff. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's some credit, maybe there's a guarantee, maybe it applies to my program. That's most places. But what Nancy just talked about and what else you all are making that almost a guarantee, which again, if I'm an adult learner, I got limited time, limited money, I want to know where I can place my bet. So this transparency also gives folks like John an ability to create apps and tools that can link that data in new ways and analyze it and get it in front of learners, faculty, and other folks. So keep pushing on that transparency for the dissent, but also to accelerate our opportunity here.
That's great. Yeah, very well said. I do, one of the things that we've seen is that when we do this work and when we offer our learners credit for what they know and can do, we see an increase in retention, we see an increase in completion rates. I'd love to hear a little bit more, and I'll start with you, Emily. Just tell us what you have seen in action. Like, what has been the impact of this that is tangible, whether it's data or a qualitative story, anything like that? Would love to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, we've been throwing around quite a few of the statistics around, you know, changes to overall completion rates, persistence rates, enrollment rates, and I think something that gets left out of that story sometimes is a little bit more qualitative, and it has a lot to do with confidence and trust. So the knowing that you're applying to or enrolling in an institution that respects the learning that you've done in the past and says that you specifically have completed something that we, the institution, believe to be college-level learning can be a really transformative confidence boost for students, especially students maybe coming back to school after a long time, maybe trying after a number of failed experiences. That message that your school views you in a certain way and sees you as having been successful in something like that, we hear from Guild students over and over again that, like, oh, they gave me credit for something that I know that I'm good at, a training that I really did well in. That can be a really powerful, like, get me over that first speed bump of, ooh, I don't know if I can actually do this and take the leap and go back to school. So I think it's worth highlighting when we also talk about the numbers of completion and persistence, et cetera.
That's great. And John, I know you've done some work with Kale and others. Would love to hear some of the kind of proof points that you have that kind of support this work.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Lisa. And to kind of echo some of the things that Emily was saying, I think that you know, when it comes to being able to look at this student population specifically, you know, the truth of the matter is that enrollment is down, right? Since 2019, there's 1 million less students, right? So institutions need to stop looking at the traditional students, right? Or the ones that are coming right out of high school. That population is not even existent anymore as much as it used to be, and they continue to decline. So if you want to talk about diverse populations and you want to talk about addressing the equity piece, right? You need to address the students that are out there with some college credit but no degree, the students that are out there considered to be displaced workers that maybe never even been to school, and that you can be able to help convert their their prior experiences to credit, right? So that's really where the opportunity is being able to move away from those traditional student populations, is now focusing on a more diverse set. And then students are receptive to credit for prior learning, right? They save time and money. On an aspect from a time perspective, they save about 9 to 14 months is a statistic out there. And then from a money perspective, I think it's about $1,200 to $10,000. And that's a lot of money for these folks, right? So it's about really, as we've been saying up here, is kind of making sure that their time and their effort is respected and that it's taken into account.
Yeah, Absolutely, absolutely. Radhika, Nancy, any other stories? Amber, you as well. Any quantitative or qualitative pieces where you've really seen this kind of thing in action and delivering results?
It's more anecdotal for LSU, but in the construction management program, they've had a lot of uptick in students like from high school, because we have these all different on-ramps to different points in the program. Like a high schooler can get in and get their feet wet and find out, okay, is this field for me? So, those kind of opportunities have opened up, again, access, right? Like Joey says, what's not to love? Equity, good.
I love it, I love it.
Yeah, and I would just add, our employers cheer this. So, and a lot of them use their trainings as their step eligibility for fully funded programs. So you have to go through that first. And then they celebrate those folks who complete those and move on. And so we celebrate them also. And we have a very high persistence and graduation rate anyway, but even higher amongst those groups.
That's great. That's great. I think I'm going to have one more question for the panel, and then we'll open it up to the audience. But as we think about credit for X and kind of where all of this work can go next, so we're at the baseline of like awarding credit, giving credit. What does the future of credit for X look like from your perspective? What else could we be doing? What more can we do to expand this? Emily, I'll start with you, and we can just work our way down the line.
I think the next frontier that I get really excited about is to really expand the idea and the definition and the notion of credit. Not only college credit, but certainly into things like skills and competencies, which the panel has talked a little bit about today, but also credit in terms of recognition and the on-ramp onto other pathways, right? If we want there to be workforce training that gets college credit at school, we also want there to be learning that happens in the classroom that helps an actual person move up in a career while they're at the same company, right? Recognition for learning in all the areas it happens, and have that be reciprocal, right? Have the connection between learning and school, work and school, be a lot more flow in a lot more directions and two ways. So I think what I get excited about is credit in all its forms, recognition in all its forms.
Yeah, and I think for us, it's also expanding to make sure that everybody understands that this is the responsibility of the institution. It doesn't rest with just one office or one individual. Right. Everybody needs to be involved in providing access, opportunity, and equity to learners, right? Be it from anywhere. And then the other thing we are trying to do is not to consider only non-credit. Credit, like Emily said, this is our learning ecosystem. Right. And yeah, learners can fit anywhere. The other thing that I'm excited about is I'm working with my team to have a section within the courses itself where we can say, okay, these are your course outcomes, but then also have a section called skills gained, so that, again, students can see for themselves what are the skills that they're learning out of each course. The point about they don't know what they don't know, and we are trying to make sure that they can articulate by the time they get out of the course. So I'm super excited about that.
That's great.
That's great. Yes, I think that from a technology perspective, we really need to start building tools that are designed to help workers, learners, educational providers, employers, and state agencies, the support that they need to really look at the learning, hiring, and talent needs, right? And beyond that, we need tools that put competencies to work. Right? And I'll also add, when I think about building technology for credit for prior learning, I think of three things, and they all revolve around one thing, which is transparency. 100% transparency, not 75, not 50, not 100% transparency, right? And around that transparency, these three areas, one is occupational and career transparency, achievement transparency, and credential transparency, right? Learners want to know, what are all of my options to complete my career and academic goals, right? Workers who are in the space, they want to know, hey, based on my current credentialing and where I'm at today and my experience, how does this align with pathways that are emerging, right? So that way I don't get nixed, or I don't get undercut from what's happening in the future. Educational providers are really working to better contextualize their instructional and assessment practices, right? In that same vein, employers are really starting to turn their heads and say, hey, you know what, we need to align our job descriptions to match the language of the educators, right? So that way their competencies are aligned. And then finally, what I'll mention is that state agencies across the nation, they're always promoting student success, right? And they do it via credential connections within their own state and within their own region. So for any entrepreneurs, ed tech, or aspiring entrepreneurs in the room, if you can solve for those issues, in the venture capital world, they call that a unicorn company. So I'm in that space, so we're going for it. And there's a huge opportunity, really, to develop a tool. And also, as Amber mentioned before, all the tools that are available today to do those assessments and that work, they all seat time-based, right? Is 100 years old. So we need to be able to develop tools that are customizable, flexible, that are going to be able to align with each individual student, so that way they can be able to get their career, academic, and personal dreams.
Awesome. Yes.
Okay, snaps to everything that's already been mentioned. I'm going to focus on policy for a second. I was on a panel about 3 years ago. It was an international panel with someone from the South Africa Qualifications Commission and someone who works within the European Union doing credit for prior learning. And it was interesting to hear how far ahead other countries were in establishing federal and localized policies that reinforce the ecosystem we've just talked about. And when you listen to their stories, in particular South Africa, right, where we are on the other side of apartheid and we're really thinking about how we overcome a system that has, again, systematically oppressed and marginalized people, credit for prior learning was one of the first things that they went to and acknowledged in, a federal or federated way. And so we have to push this conversation with states. I think that's where it's starting. States are starting to say, why would we pump all of these dollars into these multiple sectors? It's all our taxpayer dollars too, when there's inefficiency, and then we have people who can't get the jobs that they need. We're producing inequities again. And then the same at a federal level is figuring out I don't think we've figured out what the federal solution is around this, but there has to be a call for attention to this at the federal level. And I would say each of us has voice and volume within our circles to bring this to light, to bring this to our legislators, to tell your lobbyists at your institutions who are with your tech companies that this is important to all of us. And if we're going to see something sustained, and again, our system fully shifted, we're going to have that conversation.
Love that. Yeah, and I think that conversation is the opportunity now. And so with Credit for X, we bring to the table not just K through 16 in some kind of coordinated effort, but also the employers who want to have corporate trainings and the industry associations that are behind the certifications and the military whose trainings are really important, and all of those groups around the table in order to have some coordinated effort. And South Africa is far ahead of us, so is Europe, recognizing as you start in kindergarten and going all the way through, employers play a really large role with apprenticeships that are given credit, that continue to move you forward. And so I think this is the perfect opportunity to bring everyone around the table because everyone's actually a stakeholder.
I love it. I love it. We are all the creators of opportunity. It's incumbent on us to do that work. So we are just about at time. So I don't think we're going to have time for audience Q&A, but I would just offer that if anyone does have questions, happy to stick around for a few minutes here at the end, but also don't want to keep our panelists over time. But thank you so much to each of you for the work you do to create opportunity and for joining us. And thanks to all of you for hanging out with us so late in the day, but appreciate it.
Thank you.